If you ever go camping in the American wilderness, remember one thing. If you hear someone crying outside your tent at 3 a.m., don't go out. Because sometimes, it's not a person. Last fall, I decided to go camping alone in a remote part of Yellowstone National Park. I'd been camping for years, and honestly, I loved the silence of the wilderness. No traffic, no phones, no noise, just trees and the sound of the wind. When I arrived at the small campground, there were only 2 other campers there. One older couple in an RV, and a park ranger making his final rounds before sunset. As I was setting up my tent, the ranger walked over. He looked around the woods like he was checking something. Then he said something strange. "Just one rule tonight," he sighed calmly. "Whatever happens, don't leave your tent after 3 a.m. I laughed a little. "Bears?" I asked. He didn't smile. "Just trust me," he said. "Stay inside." Then he walked away. At the time, I figured it was just some ranger trying to scare campers. Maybe wildlife activity or something. The evening was peaceful. I made a small campfire, cooked some canned chili, and watched the stars. Out there, the sky looks unreal. Millions of stars. No city lights. Around 11 p.m., I crawled into my tent and fell asleep. For a while, everything was quiet. Then I woke up suddenly. My phone screen lit up when I tapped it. 3:07 a.m. At first, I didn't know why I woke up. Then I heard it. A woman crying. Soft, quiet. Somewhere outside in the woods. At first I thought maybe it was the couple from the RV. Maybe someone got hurt. But the crying sounded closer, like it was near my campsite. "Hello?" I called from inside the tent. No answer. Just crying. "So," painful sobbing. "Please," a woman's voice whispered. My stomach tightened. "Help me." The voice sounded like it was maybe 20 feet away, right near the tree line. My first instinct was to unzip the tent and go check. But then I remembered what the ranger said. "Don't leave your tent after 3 a.m. I stayed still. The crying continued. "Please, I'm lost." Her voice sounded weak, terrified. Every instinct in my body told me to help. But something felt wrong. The voice never moved closer, never moved farther away. It stayed in the exact same spot for almost 5 minutes. Just crying. 10, soothingly crunch. A branch snapped right outside my tent. I froze. My breathing stopped. The crying immediately stopped too. Dead silence. Then I heard footsteps slowly circling my tent. Crunch. 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 Heavy footsteps. Way heavier than a woman. Something walked around my tent slowly. Once. Twice. 3 times. My heart was pounding so loud I thought whatever was outside could hear it. Then the woman's voice came back, but this time it was right next to my tent. So close I could hear the breathing. "Why won't you help me?" the voice sounded. Wrong now. Deeper. Like someone trying to imitate a woman. My blood ran cold. Then something brushed the side of the tent fabric. Slowly. Like fingers dragging across it. "Please," the voice whispered again. I grabbed my flashlight but didn't turn it on. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, suddenly, bang. Something slammed against the back of the tent. I almost screamed. Heavy footsteps ran a few feet away. Then stopped. More silence. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Nothing. Eventually the sky started getting lighter. Around 5:30 a.m., birds started chirping. I finally opened the tent slowly. The campsite looked normal. Quiet. Peaceful. But when I walked around the tent, my stomach dropped. There were footprints everywhere. Huge ones. Like a big man wearing boots had been circling my tent all night. But the worst part, there were 2 different sets of footprints. One set went around my tent. The other set stopped right outside my tent door, like someone had been standing there waiting, and the second said. They were barefoot. But the footprints were massive, way bigger than a normal human foot. I packed my gear faster than I ever had in my life. When I drove out of the campground, the ranger was at the entrance gate. He looked at me and asked one question. "Did you hear it?" I nodded slowly. His face went pale. Then he said something I'll never forget. "That thing's been out here for years," he said quietly. "It cries like a lost hiker, so people leave their tents." I asked him what it was. He shook his head. "Doesn't matter," he said. "Just be glad you didn't go outside." Because according to the ranger, the last camper who followed the crying voice at 3 a.m. was never found again. Camping in the woods is supposed to be peaceful, quiet, relaxing. But one night in the American wilderness, a scream from the next campsite turned a normal camping trip into something no one could explain. And by morning, one camper had completely vanished. It happened during a summer camping trip in the mountains of Colorado. My cousin Jake and I had planned the trip for months, just a weekend away from the city, hiking, fishing, and sleeping under the stars. The campground was small, only about 6 campsites spread out along a dirt trail in the middle of thick forest. When we arrived that evening, we noticed another camper setting up a tent in the site right next to ours. He looked like he was in his mid-30s, a tall guy, beard, wearing a baseball cap. He gave us a quick wave, but didn't really talk much. "Solo camper?" Jake said quietly. We finished setting up our tent and started a small campfire. The sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains, and the woods got dark fast. The only sounds were crickets and the occasional wind moving through the trees. Around 9:30 p.m., the guy from the next campsite finally walked over. "Hey," he said. "Name's Ryan." We introduced ourselves and talked for maybe 10 minutes. He said he'd been road tripping across different national parks. Normal guy. Friendly enough. Before leaving, he joked about something strange. "Ever hear about people going missing in forests like this?" Jake laughed. "Dude, don't start that creepy stuff tonight." Ryan just smiled. "Just sailing. These woods are bigger than people think." Then he went back to his tent. Around 11 p.m., we crawled into our tent and tried to sleep. Everything was quiet until about 1:40 a.m. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard it again. A scream, not loud, but sharp. It came from the next campsite. Jake sat up immediately. "Did you hear that?" It whispered. Another noise came from Ryan's campsite, something hitting the ground. Then the zipper of a tent opening fast. Jake grabbed his flashlight. Maybe he hurt himself or something. We stepped outside. The night was freezing cold and completely dark except for our flashlights. Ryan's campsite was about 30 feet away. His tent was open. The flap was moving slightly in the wind. "Ryan," Jake called. No response. We walked closer. "Ryan," I shouted. Still nothing. When we reached the tent, the scene made my stomach drop. His sleeping bag was still inside, but it looked like something had dragged it halfway out of the tent. His backpack was knocked over. Flashlight on the ground, still turned on, but Ryan was gone. Jake looked around nervously. Maybe he went to the bathroom or something. But then we saw something strange in the dirt. Marks, like something heavy had been dragged across the ground for a few feet. Then the marks suddenly stopped, like whatever was dragging had lifted. We shined our lights around the trees. Nothing. Just dark forest. Jake whispered, "Okay, that's weird." Then suddenly, crack. A loud branch snapped somewhere deep in the woods. Both of us froze. Our flashlights pointed toward the sound. For a second, I thought I saw something move between the trees. Something tall, but it disappeared instantly. "Did you see that?" Jake asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. We stood there listening, but the woods were silent again. After about 10 minutes of calling Ryan's name with no answer, we went back to our tent and locked the zipper. Neither of us slept. At sunrise, we went straight to the park ranger station near the campground entrance. When we told the ranger what happened, his expression changed immediately. He grabbed his radio and called for backup. Within, no war. 2 more rangers and a search team arrived. They searched the woods around the campsite for almost 6 hours. Dogs. Drones. Everything. They found Ryan's campsite exactly how we described it. But they never found Ryan. No blood, no footprints leading away. No signs of an animal attack. Nothing. Just a half-dragged sleeping bag and a tent left wide open in the middle of the forest. Before we left the campground, one of the older rangers pulled us aside. He asked us a strange question. Did either of you hear someone calling for help after the scream? We both shook our heads. Why? Jake asked. The ranger looked toward the forest. Then he said quietly, "Sometimes people hear a scream, then follow the voice into the woods." He paused. "And sometimes the voice doesn't belong to a person." Ryan was officially reported missing 2 days later. Search teams looked for him for weeks, but he was never found. And the creepiest part, according to the ranger, that campground had 3 other disappearances in the last 10 years. All of them started the exact same way, a scream. In the middle of the night, from the next campsite, when you go camping deep in the woods, you expect silence, maybe wildlife, maybe the wind through the trees. But one camper discovered something far more terrifying, because when he arrived at his campsite, someone was already there. And whoever it was didn't want to be seen. This happened during a solo camping trip in the forests of Oregon. I had taken a week off from work just to disconnect from everything. No phone service, no city noise, just me in the wilderness. I found a small backcountry campsite about 3 miles down a hiking trail. It wasn't an official campground, just one of those spots people use when they want to be completely alone. When I arrived around 5 p.m., the place looked empty. Tall pine trees surrounded a small clearing with a stone fire pit in the center. Perfect camping spot. But as I walked closer, something felt off. The fire pit had ashes inside it. That wasn't strange by itself. Plenty of campers used that spot before. But when I got closer, I noticed something disturbing. The ashes were still warm. Someone had used that fire very recently. I stood there for a moment, scanning the trees. Nothing. Just wind moving through the branches. Probably another camper who left earlier. Primera told myself. Still, I started noticing more things. Near the fire pit were fresh footprints in the dirt. And they were big, bigger than mine. They led toward the trees, then disappeared into the forest. At that point, one almost packed up and left. But the sun was already dropping, and hiking 3 miles back in the dark didn't sound like a good idea. So I set up my tent anyway. As the sky got darker, the woods became unbelievably quiet. No birds, no insects. Just silence. That kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Around Ochapame, I made a small fire and cooked some instant noodles. The whole time I kept looking into the forest. Something about that campsite just felt wrong. Eventually, I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. By 10 p.m., I crawled into my tent. The fire had burned down to embers, and the forest was pitch black. For a while, everything was peaceful. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy footsteps in the leaves, somewhere outside my tent. At first, I thought it was an animal. Maybe a deer, but the footsteps sounded deliberate, like someone walking carefully. Crunch. Posing crunch. They circled around the campsite slowly. My heart started racing. "Hello?" I called out, nervously. The footsteps stopped, instantly. Complete silence. For almost a minute. Nothing happened. Then crunch. The footsteps started again. But this time, they were closer. Right near my tent. I grabbed my flashlight and turned it on. The beam lit up the tent walls. Then suddenly something blocked the light from outside. A shadow. A tall, human-shaped shadow, standing right next to my tent. I froze. The shadow didn't move. I could hear breathing outside. Slow, heavy breathing. Then a voice spoke quietly. "That's my campsite." My blood went cold. I didn't see anyone here, I said quickly. No response. Just breathing. Then the voice spoke again. You shouldn't be here. The way he said it made my stomach twist. Not angry, just cold. I tried to stay calm. Look, man, I can pack up and leave in the morning, I said. For a moment there was silence again. Suddenly, the shadow moved. I heard footsteps walking away from the tent. Fast. Within seconds, they disappeared into the woods. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Every sound made me jump. Branches snapping, leaves moving. Pia mire. Posimo. Once I even thought I saw a figure between the trees. Finally, around 6 a.m., the sky started getting brighter. I packed my gear as fast as I could. Before leaving, I looked around the campsite one last time. That's when I saw something that made my heart drop. About 15 feet behind my tent, hidden behind a tree, was another tent. Small, camouflage-colored, blending perfectly into the forest. I hadn't seen it when I arrived, and the zipper was slightly open, like someone had been watching my campsite the whole time. I didn't wait another second. I grabbed my backpack and hiked out as fast as I could. When I reached the trailhead parking lot, a park ranger was sitting in his truck. I told him what happened. He listened, quietly, then sighed. Let me guess, he said camouflagetendi. I nodded. His face went serious. We've had reports about someone living deep in these woods, he said. Guy doesn't like visitors. I asked if they ever caught him. The ranger shook his head. Nope. Then he added something that still gives me chills. He usually waits until campers fall asleep before coming out. I stared at him. Then why did he come out while I was awake? The ranger looked back toward the forest, then said quietly, maybe he thought, you already were.